Hi ladies, I just wanted to jump in to answer some questions that I received this week. So I'm just gonna pop straight into reading some questions. And if you have any others, please let me know. So the first question is about how detrimental is a slip up or gluten and dairy. So if you remember watching one of the original videos where I was teaching you how to read the tests, and one of the questions was, are there any foods in addition to the test results that we should avoid whether or not they show up? Gluten and dairy was on that list. So her question is, how detrimental is a slip up in gluten and dairy? It's a great question. Let's start with dairy. So if dairy did not show up on your test at all, then I would say not that detrimental. If it showed up, it would have sort of the same bearing as anything else. And it would depend on, was it just barely a yellow? Was it a medium yellow? Was it a red? So it really depends on your personal test results with the dairy specifically. So I really would, if you decide to experiment with that or accidentally have exposure when you're out at a restaurant or whatever, really monitor your individual reaction, because that's very per person in terms of, man, I bloated out immediately, or dairy really gives me a headache, or I broke out within a few days, or whatever it is, or it immediately constipated me. Dairy can also be really associated with like sinus problems and drainage. So if that's something you struggle with, then that's one that I would be more strict on. So it really depends. Dairy is kind of a per person thing. So I would monitor where it is on your test and how you personally feel if you do bring that in. The other thing is, there's different kinds of dairy. So I talked about this a little bit in the video when I was talking about eliminating them. Milk would be like my primary avoidance because of the lack of nutrients, the processing, the way it's digested mostly is sugar in your body, that sort of thing. But certain cheeses or certain yogurts, things like that may have less of a reaction. And again, that sort of depends on your individual sensitivity level and what showed up on your test. So I hope that answered the question. The last thought I would have there is, I talked about supplements in one of the most recent videos. If it is a concern and you're like, man, I really do react, but sometimes you just don't know when you go out to eat, they put it in mashed potatoes or salad dressings or whatever, and I do my best, but I'm still worried because it does give me a migraine or whatever, I would definitely make sure to invest in something like the glutenase enzymes that help you digest gluten and dairy, not as an excuse to binge on them, but as protection for cross-contamination and exposure. So I hope that answers that question. So let's move on to gluten. Gluten I get a little more serious about, because it is so damaging, it's so disruptive, and it's such a sensitivity in so many people. So in terms of, she had asked, is it sort of like a 1 step forward, 3 steps back situation? With gluten particularly, it has more of a tendency to do that just because it does raise the zonulin levels, it does increase gut permeability. And so it kind of depends on where you're coming from. If you are somebody that jumped into this group and you were like, sometimes I have some digestive troubles, but generally I have tons of energy, I'm really healthy, my immune system is great, I'm able to function the way I want to, I poop normally, my skin is clear, all this kind of stuff, then it may not be as harmful for you, because your body can then mount the response. It can heal very quickly, and maybe you don't even physically feel anything at all. That's the best situation. Like my husband is very much like that. He's healthy all the time. Every once in a while, depending on a social situation, he's gotten better about it. But even like sort of towards the beginning, when we were getting a little more strict about this, he would occasionally go to work and have a piece of pizza because he's the boss and he provided it for everybody or whatever. And he didn't notice any physical reactions. So in terms of taking steps forward versus back and how damaging that can be, it's per person, but it has more of a tendency to be damaging. And so it would really depend on your level of health, where you're coming from. So if you are somebody, for example, that came in with some autoimmune diseases, some chronic IBS, some ulcerative colitis, some chronic constipation, a lot of acne, inflammation, that sort of thing, a lot of imbalances that you're trying to work on, then I would very, very I would be very, very careful about my gluten exposure because it is so reactive in so many people. And again, that can be a reaction to wheat, that can be a reaction to gliadin, that can be a reaction to gluten, it can be a reaction to the glyphosate that is sprayed on it. But the more sick you are, the more important it would be to be careful with that. So I hope that answers the question. And again, Glutenese or what's it called? I think Wheat Rescue is the new one from Microbiome Labs. Those would be great enzymes to keep if you are nervous when you go out to eat or you're in a new situation. That would be a really great thing to keep on hand like all the time. Her next question is, I've heard a lot about soy, but it's not always good. It seems it's often used as a dairy substitute, and it's on her yellow list. So what's my take on that? So generally I do avoid soy. There are a lot of varying and conflicting opinions on that, whether it can actually be healthful or if it's not healthy at all. I think where that really comes in, again, is where is it coming from? So primarily your soy that you're going to get at the grocery store or that's going to be in processed products is usually a GMO crop. So it's a genetically modified thing. And anytime we have gut problems or we're sick or we're working on our health, we want to avoid genetically modified products because our bodies aren't designed to break them down and to digest them in that form. They have been modified, and our body works very synergistically with nature, and we've sort of changed nature when it's a modified organism. So with soy, typically that's what you're getting. If you have a organic, non-GMO soy, then there are potential health benefits. So really that would be a matter of sourcing and your personal response to it and your personal health goals. The other concern that you will hear a lot in the health community is dependent on your hormones. And there are differing opinions on that as well, whether it can be helpful for you if you have hormone issues or whether it can be hindering because it can act estrogenic. So if you would, for example, have a hormone test where you are, producing a lot of estrogen and your goal is to maybe increase your progesterone or lower your estrogen depending on where your levels are and to maybe detoxify that more efficiently, then maybe soy isn't the best thing to do for you at that time. But generally speaking, if you're able to find a non-GMO organic soy, there are potential health benefits, and so it would be dependent on your reaction and the quality of the product. She also says, this has been an eye-opening experience. I'm glad I'm doing it, giving me insight, knowledge, and support. Yay, that's good. I'm so excited. So she's talking about her daughter having gut issues and taking baby steps with her, trying to find swaps for gluten and dairy, her two favorite food groups. Yeah, absolutely. So I highly, 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 highly recommend with children to find those swaps. And so I really recommend finding bloggers that you know and like and trust. And so for me, I always recommend Alana's Pantry and againstallgrain.com. So that's Alana Amsterdam and Danielle Walker. And the reason I recommend those two primarily is because every single recipe that they give you is going to be good. It's going to taste good. It's probably going to be fairly easy to make. They are excellent in what they do, and they were two of the first bloggers that I found. The other reason that I really recommend them is because when you jump into a lifestyle change like this and you're trying to avoid wheat and you're trying to avoid dairy and you're Googling things with the word paleo in front of it or you're Googling things with gluten-free, you're going to get like 100 different recipes with 100 different types of flours and 100 different dairy substitutes, and you're like, I can't buy cassava flour and chestnut flour and almond flour and coconut flour and oat milk and you're like, okay, you can't like buy a new ingredient for every single recipe you ever want to make. So the reason I like these two women is they work together in terms of you're probably going to need to invest in some almond flour, some coconut sugar, some coconut flour. I'm trying to think what else you might need that would be unique in their recipes. But those are a couple things that would be very, very consistent that they would use a lot of. So if you're gonna find, like for example, a chocolate chip recipe, Danielle Walker, Against All Grain, she has what's called Real Deal chocolate chip cookies, and they taste like Toll House soft baked cookies. They are amazing. I have made them for company over and over and over and over again. They're some of my family's favorite treat, and you will never know the difference. So your daughter really likes gluten and dairy, but primarily why does she like that? Because it's in a lot of processed sweet foods, right? There's probably something like a Pop-Tart or a chocolate chip cookie that she likes, or there's like a food. So instead of identifying the ingredient that you're eliminating and saying those are her favorite things, I would identify the food that is her favorite thing and then find a swap for it. And if you need help with that, please reach out. I'm happy to help. So I would definitely recommend Danielle Walker, Against All Grain. She has, I think 4 cookbooks now, and I have every single one of them because every single one is a tremendous value. Alana, she has so many recipes on her website, alanaspantry.com. She also does have a cookbook. She also has a, almond flour cupcake cookbook. Those are amazing. So if your daughter really likes some cupcakes, that is an amazing resource. And then I would also recommend checking out the Spunky Coconut. And the reason I recommend her, she has a cookbook, Easy Paleo Meals. Her name is Kelly Brazina, and Easy Paleo Meals is it's got a lot of recipes I really, really like in it, and that's sort of like a regular meals and dinners and stuff like that, spice mixes. But she really, if you go to her website, I feel like really she specializes in sweet treats. Like she's really, really, really good at sweet treats. So especially with kids, finding those replacements is really helpful. So she has also, I think it's called Dairy-Free Ice Cream Cookbook, so you can make your own ice cream. And then on our website, she has cookies and ice cream recipes and all sorts of different things that you can get. So I would definitely recommend those 3 women for sure. Tess says, I need to find that recipe. I have several of her books. Yes, thank you for posting that. That is exactly the recipe. She has a 2.0 as well, Real Deal Chocolate Chip Cookie 2.0. I've never tried it. I don't know why she even needed to tweak it, because the first one is like literally amazing. So I hope that helps in terms of children, because I know that's a struggle. And so where we may be super strict in terms of, okay, well, I've made this change, but now I even want to get away from processed foods, it may be a little bit more of a slow progression for children in terms of, yeah, we're avoiding these ingredients 100%, like that's not optional. But maybe I'm not going to get you off cookies right away, right? I'm going to swap a cookie. Maybe I'm going to give you like a brownie. And so really, if you can find the right recipes, they don't end up feeling like they're missing a lot. So I would try to identify those foods. That would be my best recommendation there. Okay, I have another question here. Let's see. So I pack my lunch, so that is the hardest because I usually took salads or a sandwich, and lettuce was one of my sensitive foods. So yeah, let me finish reading this and I'll get to that. So I guess suggestions for bread, lunch meat, and lettuce alternatives. So lettuce is a big one for people. I don't really know why, unless maybe it's something they spray it with, but really, I view lettuce sensitivity almost as a blessing in disguise because it's like a conduit for water. Is kind of like what that is. There's not a lot of minerals or vitamins or nutritional density in lettuce. So being forced to make salads with other greens is highly beneficial. So when they say lettuce on your food sensitivities report, it literally means lettuce. It doesn't mean kale. It doesn't mean Swiss chard. It doesn't mean arugula. It doesn't mean any of those other leafy greens that you can get. So I would look for those other options. If you get like the packs at the grocery store of the fluffy leafy greens or whatever, and you usually get lettuce, look for the arugula instead or some of the other options. So you wouldn't even have to change having a salad for lunch, but you are gonna be able, because of that, to get more vitamins and more nutritional density, avoiding the lettuce and choosing some other greens. But bread, there's a couple suggestions I have. There's a company called Legit Bread Company that makes mixes that you can just literally in the box, but they're all ingredients that are are super clean. I always recommend, if you're going to use something that is quote unquote processed, that when you look at the ingredients, it's technically something that you could make at home if you had the time and inclination. So that just means that you read the ingredients. There's maybe 5 or 6 of them. You recognize what they are. They are things that are that you could have in your home, and you could have made this if you wanted to figure it out. So Legit Bread Company is a great one. They have some mixes. You can do that. Again, Alana's Pantry, Against All Grain, both of them have lots of different bread recipes. So there's one, for example, from Alana's Pantry that has flax in it that I really, really like. It ends up tasting like a nutty bread. It's got a lot of fluff and a lot of flavor, but then she has other options. So if flax is on your food sensitivities list, there are other options, no worries. Danielle Walker, Against All Grain, she has a blender bread recipe. So there's a lot of ways that you can make bread yourself at home with different ingredients. They are very easy. And so that's the thing I want to reiterate. When you're making these changes, it can seem overwhelming because it's like, oh my gosh, I have to cook. This is like, I don't want to spend a lot of time in this. And I want to assure you, I'm not someone that spends a lot of time on cooking. But these bread recipes and these cookie recipes are so easy. Bread recipes, basically you mix some of the dry ingredients up, you mix some of the wet ingredients up, you put it in a bread pan, and you stick it in the oven. It could not be easier. So those are some options for bread. If you have, there's a brand that I do particularly like. It's not the best in the whole world in terms of ingredients, but it is convenient and it's not bad. And that is Eben Bread Company, or I think it's called Eben's Bakehouse. EBAN, and a lot of times you'll see that in like the frozen section in Kroger. It kind of depends on where you live, if that might be available or not, but those are some options for sure. Homemade is always best if you have the time. Maybe make a loaf on the weekend, and you can cut it up and you can use it as sandwiches. So wraps is another great option as well. And Siete brand is usually carried at Whole Foods or health food stores. And that's Siete, like, what is that, the number 7? I had to think about that for a second, in Spanish. And that they have almond wraps, coconut wraps, cassava wraps. I think cassava is the most flexible and the most close to what you would be used to with a tortilla wrap. And so those are really, really great options if you like to send your kids with wraps to school, or if that's something that you enjoy, or if you want to replace your sandwich bread with a wrap, you can do the exact same thing. You can make tacos with them. There's a lot of different options there. Siete Foods is a brand that I would definitely look into. They have grain-free chips, they have those wraps, they have a lot of different cool options, and they're really yummy. So that's a good one. And then another brand I really like is Simple Mills. So again, trying to take things that would be processed, but technically you can make them at home. Simple Mills is a great brand that uses very few ingredients. They're all really high quality ingredients. You could technically do this at home, but they figured out the perfect portions, the perfect mixes, but they come in a mix. So you just have to add some eggs or some oil or whatever it is. And they have pancakes. I think they have some versions of bread. They have some muffins. They have cookies. They have a lot of different options. So that is a wonderful, wonderful brand. They also have grain-free crackers that you can buy at the store, and those are really good. Those are actually some of our favorites. So bread, lunch meat, lettuce alternatives. So with lunch meat, just being careful that you're getting lunch meat. What's the brand I usually like? Applegate Farms is typically pretty good, but I always check to see what the ingredients are. So you want to look for things that don't have sugar in them, nitrates, things like that. So you're going to be looking for, if it is sweetened, maybe it's with a little bit of honey, and that all the ingredients are okay. You're not seeing a lot of chemicals in there. The other option is sometimes you may find, depending on where you live, you may be able to get them to cut you some fresh lunch meat as well, and that may be something that you can find from like a pasture-raised chicken or something like that. That's harder to find for sure, but depending on the sourcing and the store that you're at, you may be able to get some really, really fresh lunch meat. Or if you are in an area that is close to local farmers, or you develop relationships with local butchers, you may have more access there as well. Yeah, so lettuce alternatives, just go to that leafy green section and you have arugula, you have baby kale, you have a bunch of different things that you can mix and match. But honestly, sometimes with salads, we get stuck in the leafy greens as the base of our salad. And you'll see a lot of times next to that area, you'll see sort of like coleslaw mixes where it's like organic broccoli, organic cabbage, and organic carrots, and it's all shredded up. That makes an awesome base for a salad. It's crunchy, it's organic vegetables. You literally have a bowl of vegetables. You have variety. You're having broccoli and cabbage, which is like really supportive of detoxification. So just shake it up and try not to focus so much on one ingredient and be like, okay, what else can I maybe put in here? You can even do cooked vegetables. If you notice that eating raw vegetables is a little too hard for your digestion, you can literally do a salad that is actually a bowl of like cooked cauliflower, cooked broccoli, and then maybe you have some seeds sprinkled on top and whatever other toppings that you enjoy, like roasted chickpeas. Like there's a brand called Chickpedos, makes it a crunchy topping and it's really, really excellent. So those are some ideas as well. Sugar alternatives for baking. So she's specifically asking for cane sugar. So typically with baking, I usually recommend that you Google paleo in front of anything you want. So if you are craving a brownie, Google paleo brownie. If you are craving a apple pie, Google paleo apple pie. The reason I recommend that to my clients is because, not that I think everybody needs to be strict paleo, because that's not right for everybody, but in the dessert realm, if you're Googling things that have paleo, then you're gonna get more natural whole food ingredients. You're going to be avoiding dairy, you're going to be avoiding wheat and gluten, and you're going to be getting those sugar alternatives. So primarily in paleo baking, they're using things like coconut sugar, dates, honey, maple syrup, more natural sweeteners than processed cane sugar. So I don't do a lot of substitution in my baking. I don't take recipes and then say, how can I swap this out very often? Because I know that if there's something that I want to eat, somebody somewhere has already figured out the perfect portions with the foods that I want. So I don't usually do swaps. I just look for a recipe that uses the ingredients that I want. And that's where I do recommend investing in those cookbooks, because a lot of them have amazing dessert recipes, and just maybe try them out on the blog first. So check out Alana's Pantry, check out the Spunky Coconut, check out Against All Grain, check out Paleo MG. Those are a bunch of resources that you can kind of see whose style you vibe with, who makes like a lot of the dinners that you enjoy. Maybe try a couple of the desserts, see which ones your kids really like, and then from there, maybe start investing in those pantry options. So get a bag of coconut sugar, maybe start buying some dates, make sure you don't go low on your honey, that sort of thing. So that's typically my approach to it. So I hope that has been helpful. If you need any other support or have any other questions, please let me know. Hope you're having a great day.